JoJo, Have You Learned Nothing? And Save the Tears for Pillow are just prime examples of the rude and unnecessary comments that the young girls on the reality TV show Dance Moms experienced their whole childhood. These junior league dancers spent their entire lives in the spotlight, enduring the abuse and toxicity their dance instructor, Abby Lee Miller, inflicted upon them. Hello, I'm Emily Gingrich, and I'm going to share this awful toxicity that Abby caused on the girls. From Maddie Ziegler cutting off all contact with Abby after quitting the show, to a pyramid representing the dancer's status, and the pressure Abby put on the two dancers, Maddie and Chloe, and their unhealthy rivalry. Maddie and Kenzie Ziegler were sisters on the show and spent their entire childhood on the dance floor. Maddie was 8 and Kenzie was 6 when the show began. From the start, Abby put a lot of pressure on Maddie because in her eyes, she was the best dancer. And the best in Abby's eyes alone, because the show began in 2011, and by 2016, the two girls and their mother, Melissa, decided enough was enough, and it was time to move on, so they quit the show. Matt explains her experience on the show years later in the article by Carrie Justice, stating, "I had more stress at that age than I did after I left the show." Matt explains how Abby created an unhealthy mindset that winning was everything and being first matters most. Maddie was literally a child when she was fed these lies, and this is a direct correlation to why Maddie left the show, because Abby created such a toxic atmosphere that wasn't for anyone, especially a child. Their mother, Melissa, even apologizes to her two daughters years after quitting the show for putting them through the emotional trauma they did. Abby also used a human pyramid, not a literal human pyramid, but pictures of girls and rankings on the team weekly. Everyone strived to be on top, to be the best, but at what point is this fair and motivating? Comparing girls on the same team is horrid and causes problems to their self-esteem at such a young age. Leslie Bruce wrote in TV's Pushy Mom Moments that Abby is subjecting students to a weekly pyramid of best to worst dancers, in which they're referring to the girls as stupid and telling them to suck it up. Maddie especially was on top the most, as you can see in this picture, making the rest of the girls feel ashamed of themselves and their capability, because ranking children is unfair and traumatic. And it makes the dancers feel like they never will be good enough or measure up to Abby's expectations. Furthermore, Bruce writes, Miller routinely makes dancers cry as a part of practice, spitting insults like, "I'd have your head on a platter," and "she doesn't have a brain in her head." Comments like these are not only cruel but damaging to girls. And finally, throughout the show, Abby always put pressure on Maddie, and a way to uplift her was to bring her up against her biggest rival, Chloe Lukasiak, who was 9 years old when the show began. From the beginning, she was constantly compared and thrown against Maddie. And Abby's twisted reason for this was to put these two competitors together to uplift Maddie and bring Chloe's self-esteem down, because she was always falling short of victory over Maddie, and eventually ruined their friendship. In the article, How Dance Moms Chloe Lukasiak Really Felt, being pitted against Maddie Ziegler, author Sarah Grossbart discusses Chloe's experience, stating, "I could have done the absolute best job in the world, but it still wouldn't have been good enough. And no matter how hard Chloe worked to Abby, it just was not good enough. And hearing 'you're not good enough' your entire childhood ruins a person's identity and self-worth. Because being the underdog, falling short of perfection, isn't fun for anyone, which is exactly what Chloe experienced on the show. In the end, Abby caused immense trauma, so much that Maddie, her prize dancer, no longer speaks to her anymore after quitting the show. And the pyramid doesn't even begin to touch the surface of Abby's cruelty. Maddie and Chloe's comparison, their entire lives, also meant that they couldn't realize their own self-worth. All this toxicity stems from one person, Abby Lee Miller herself, because it's not fair that these girls were put through immense and intense emotional pain and toxicity on the TV show because they gave up their childhood for our own entertainment.